I'll have a snowstorm update for you sometime this hour, no later than 11 a.m. We had Doug Kammerer on the show yesterday. This thing does look massive. This is going to be the biggest opportunity for double-digit snow totals for our area since 2016. And yeah, some of the models overnight showed ice and sleet being a part of it. I'll give you some good information on this storm no later than 11 a.m. Thor Nystrom, who is a draft expert, will be our first one of the year. I love Thor. He's going to come on with us at noon. It's never too early to start talking NFL draft now that we're down to 3 total football games left this year. What is that knocking sound in the background there, Max? Do you hear that?
I don't. That's concerning to me because my mic was off and everything in this studio is
okay.
So I'll keep an eye out for it.
It could be here. I don't think it's here, but I want to read this from Lee. Tommy and I talked about this yesterday, and I thought it was interesting because I think it's a conversation about our team. We haven't had many of those this week for the first time in a while. Lee writes, Kevin, seriously conflicted on these hires. Dan Quinn hiring a green as grass OC, and then the same with the offensive line coach. He must be looking to get fired. Who would do this when he's coaching for his job? I can't believe Josh Harris will keep him if they start the season bad on offense. Not to be the grammar police, Lee, but it's badly on offense. That would be an adverb. Pretty sure. I could be wrong. I went to public school. So Lee's not seriously conflicted. He's got an opinion here. There's no conflict for him. He thinks that Dan Quinn's making a major mistake. If he was conflicted, he would have said, but on the other hand, I never got that part from Lee. So I do think that this is an interesting conversation, especially in the wake of the news that it looks like the LA Chargers are on the verge of hiring Mike McDaniel. It's also been reported with respect to this potential hiring of Mike McDaniel to go to work for Jim Harbaugh to coach Justin Herbert in Los Angeles, that McDaniel had several options. I would assume that he would, that the head coaching opportunities, I guess, were not going to be there for Mike McDaniel. Maybe after, the Miami experience, people aren't exactly sure about Mike McDaniel as the overall head, but they like him as an offensive mind. It's interesting. I had Jay Gruden on my podcast on Friday, and Jay said something that I don't think he's ever said to me before. In all of the years of talking to Jay, I don't think he's ever said about Mike McDaniel that he's not a big fan. He actually said, I just don't see what everybody else sees. And some of you criticized Jay's criticism of Mike McDaniel because you thought there was some sort of jealousy there. Jay's been very complimentary of many offensive guys in the league, including many Shanahan guys, because some of those Shanahan guys actually started before they got with Mike and then Kyle with his brother, John. But he said, I'm just not blown away by a guy who can't protect his quarterback and throws 15 to 16 bubble screens a game and had arguably the fastest team this century since probably the greatest show on turf and didn't win anything. That's not unfair in terms of the criticism because he hasn't been able to protect Tua. He's had, for a couple of years there, he had probably the fastest team, overall team speed on offense we've seen this century. And, he got to 2 playoff games and lost both of them. Now, one of them, he did not have his starting quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. In a game against Buffalo, the first year they made it to the postseason, he had Skylar Thompson playing at quarterback in the snow at Buffalo and lost 34-31. And then the next year they went to the postseason and, remember, at Arrowhead, walked into -6 real temperature. Feels like, no more wind chill description. Used to be the wind chill is, now it's the feels like temperature. Felt like that particular night, -26. and was I think the third or fourth coldest game in NFL history. And the moment they took the field, you could see that it wasn't going to work out, that the fastest team in the NFL was going to be grounded by the cold temperatures. And they were, and they got absolutely blown out. Anyway, back to sort of the Mike McDaniel current. Not going to get a head coaching job, but apparently, according to many reports, would have had his choice of a number of offensive coordinator openings. Detroit, Baltimore, Philly, the Chargers. All of them are really good offensive coordinator opportunities. You know, especially if the Chargers get their offensive line back and healthy next year. I mean, they signed Rashawn Slater to that massive deal, and then, you know, he was out for the year with a preseason injury. Joe Alt missed much of the year. That was their problem more than anything else in LA, is they just had total injury issues, backups and backups to the backups playing along the offensive line, and they couldn't do anything to protect Justin Herbert, who was under siege week in and week out. Greg Roman was the longtime offensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco, and was for the first couple of years, and he moved on from Greg Roman, and he's going Mike McDaniel. It seems like a personality difference, but I actually give Harbaugh some credit, kind of thinking outside of the Harbaugh box there, and going with Mike McDaniel. But back to Lee's email, where he suggests that Quinn is looking to get fired. Look, I said this about the Blau hire, you know, a day or two after the hire was made. I think this was the answer inside that building all along. I don't think that even if it meant waiting and there was a good chance that McDaniel wouldn't get a head coaching job and would select Washington, would come to Washington, I think that they really did this in part because they didn't want to lose David Blau. They think David Blau is everything that people have said he's going to be, and that is the next real deal as an offensive coordinator, offensive play caller. He's never done it before. Lee, you're not wrong. He is green as grass. There's no doubt about that. But they didn't want to lose him. And there were 3 teams that reached out to want to interview him last year. They denied all those requests. The Lions reached out immediately when the season ended to interview him this year. They denied that request. And we would have read or heard about many teams, probably even the Chargers, that would have wanted to reach out and interview David Blau had Quinn not moved as quickly as he did. So he's green as grass. There's no doubt about that. And many of you, and it's not unjustifiable to have preferred that Quinn hire somebody that's done it before. Oh, by the way, like Cliff Kingsbury, just not Cliff Kingsbury's system or philosophy. He wanted something different, but somebody proven as an offensive coordinator and play caller, which Kingsbury was as a head coach in the NFL. And that's not an unreasonable opinion, but that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep David Blau. And if they had gone in another direction, they would have lost David Blau. David Blau would have become an offensive coordinator in this coaching cycle somewhere else. That's what makes the David Blau hire much different than, say, the Darnell Stapleton hire, where it's not like teams were reaching out to interview Darnell Stapleton. I have no idea. This is where we get into, I know I've said this before, but when you start talking about as a talk show host or as a fan about position coaches as if you don't know anything other than what you hear people say about them, and then you can decide whether to trust that or not. Look, the overwhelming information and positives on David Blau, unique for an assistant quarterback coach, first time. That's unique to hear all of that. And when you do hear all of that, you do have to perk up and say, why is everybody talking about this guy as the next big thing? Because inside that world, they know, game knows game. And so they understood and they believed in David Blau. By the way, Quinn's not. I think I talked about this last week. Somebody suggested that's a Hail Mary hire or Hail Mary promotion. It's not. That's not an example of a Hail Mary promotion. A Hail Mary promotion would be one in which you've never heard of the guy and you're moving him from assistant quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. No, he would have had a job in a heartbeat as an OC in this coaching cycle had Quinn not elevated him to the OC position here. Now, again, it doesn't mean he's going to be right. It doesn't mean that everybody else that would have offered him a job would have been right. He's never done it. As Tommy said to me yesterday, things tend to change when you got the headphones on and the cameras are on you as you're calling plays from the booth or the sideline. It's different. We know, we think we know, we don't, but we think we know because we have much more information about coaches and coordinators. But when we start getting down to position coaches, all due respect to even the people on the beat, they don't really know about position coaches. I can't fake being outraged or concerned about the elevation of David Blau or Darnell Stapleton into OC and O-line coach positions, or Shane Taub to the assistant O-line position. I can't fake being thrilled, flipping it around on the other side, because it's impossible to know. They've never been front-facing coaches. Even the front-facing coaches that we think we've nailed down in terms of, knowing what they're good at, knowing what they're bad at, knowing if they can do it, knowing if they can't do it, we're wrong most of the time. People in the business know, but even they get it wrong a lot. But when it comes to Stapleton or Taub, so much more than Blau, I have no idea. They clearly like Stapleton. Blau clearly likes Stapleton. That's the one thing I know about Stapleton. Blau likes him. They wanted to keep this group together, even though they moved on from their offensive coordinator, and they've moved on from their offensive line coach, but they wanted to keep a certain group together, and I would assume that making and keeping Jaden Daniels comfortable has something to do with that. We won't know whether or not these hires, these elevations, these promotions were right or wrong until they start playing games, until we have a serious sample size of games. Now, with that said, I don't think it's unreasonable to have the opinion that you would have preferred experience over inexperience. That's fair. But to denounce or to declare that Quinn is looking to get fired with these hires because they're green as grass, they don't think that. And the rest of the league, with respect to Blau, probably doesn't think that either. They probably think Washington got it right. Ben Johnson had, I'm looking for it right now. He told Nikki Javala about David Blau the other day. Nikki writes for the Athletic now. They had, Nikki got the following quote from Ben Johnson on David Blau. Ben Johnson in Detroit, and it's really Ben Johnson, tried to immediately hire David Blau when their regular season ended with no playoff games. Washington's did as well. They wanted to interview him for their open OC position, which, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, they have not yet filled.
I don't believe they have.
They have not, right?
No, they have not.
Yeah. So Ben Johnson said this to Nikki Javala over the weekend. Quote, he's got a bright future. He's really smart, has a natural way of connecting with everybody, coaches and players alike. And I know he's highly respected, not just for me, but also obviously by the Washington staff. They found tremendous value in him as well. I think he'll do an outstanding job in that role. I think he's really smart, having played quarterback. He got that inward feel of how to help elevate that position. And I think he'll be able to do that in a play calling role going forward. So I think he'll be one of those young guys that gets a head job before you know it. that from Ben Johnson about David Blau, and they obviously wanted to interview him and then potentially hire him to be their new OC. Now, being an OC for Ben Johnson in Detroit is different than being an OC for Dan Quinn in Washington. Why? Because Ben Johnson calls the plays. David Blau doesn't. I mean, David Blau wouldn't have. Dan Quinn doesn't, and David Blau wouldn't have, more likely than not, in Detroit. Now, that would have been something had Ben Johnson hired David Blau and said he's going to call the plays. That would have been a stamp of major approval. So, look, at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980, we're here a week and a few days removed from David Blau being elevated to offensive coordinator. Green as grass, never done it before. Darnell Stapleton getting a big-time job. I would suggest that the offensive line job on offense is second to offensive coordinator. I mean, I think all position coaches are important, but in terms of, what gets elevated typically to the next step, O-line coach and quarterback coach. Those are the two that typically get elevated to that next step OC more than others. So I would probably say OC and then O-line coach or quarterback coach as the most important. But how many of you agree with Lee that this is just a massive risk for Dan Quinn? That elevating two green as grass coaches to positions they've never been in is a massive risk. And it puts them in even bigger danger early in the season if they don't start off well offensively. I'll just say that 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in. 301-230-0980. I will say this, that ultimately there's so many factors that will determine Dan Quinn's future employment as the head coach of this football team. But those factors all lead to one thing. He's got to win. He's got to win more than he loses. He's got to get this team probably to 9-10 wins in the playoffs next year. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. We think we have it all figured out right now. Like, okay, the offense is, if they stay healthy, unlike last year, they have a chance to be a really good offense. But if they're not, because the defense isn't going to be much better. So that'll mean Blau screwed the thing up because everybody stayed healthy and they only won 7 games, Quinn's out. But things fast forwarding, zooming to the end of next year and having it all figured out never works when we're talking about the NFL. Like ever. It always plays out differently than we think. There are a lot of different sets of contexts that you could say, well, the hiring of Blau is still very questionable. Same with Stapleton, but they won 10 games because they improved dramatically on defense, and Brian Flores coached them up to be one of the great defenses in the league. I don't see that happening, but it's not impossible. Brian Flores is still out there. I don't know if he's going to get a head job or not, but I think the Minnesota situation is different than I think a lot of fans understand. There's something going on there. There's something going on in Minnesota that isn't necessarily just about football. You don't start taking defensive coordinator, job interviews if you're hell-bent on staying in Minnesota if you don't get the head coaching job. But that's not the question. The question is, do you agree with Lee that Dan Quinn's really out there on a limb with these two elevations to two significant offensive jobs? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I'll have a weather update on the storm. We'll do this all week long leading up to it. We'll get Doug Kammerer back on the show, maybe tomorrow or Friday, depending on how things go. Doug was on with us yesterday for a half an hour. We did a half an hour on the upcoming storm. But I'm following it closely enough. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a bit of a weather nerd. And the truth is, all of the information that all the weather people have is accessible to all of you and me. And I just barely know how to understand it. Barely. So I think I can help out on the forecast. We'll get to that at 11 a.m. We'll talk NFL draft at 12. Lots of championship talk on the show today as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. This from Simmons. Simmons writes, "Who the hell's Darnell Stapleton?" Yeah, he's our new offensive line coach. He was the assistant offensive line coach under Bobby Johnson. Bobby Johnson was fired after the season. And so the offensive line search concluded with the elevation of the assistant offensive line coach, Darnell Stapleton, getting the offensive line coach. What do you want to know about Stapleton? He actually played in the league for the Steelers and started on those 2008 Steelers that won the Super Bowl over Arizona. He was an undrafted free agent out of Rutgers. He made the team as a rookie in 2007, but was inactive during that season. In 2008, he replaced Kendall Simmons, who was the right guard who got injured. He started the final 12 games of the year, started in all three of their playoff games, including the Super Bowl win over Arizona. And then in 2009, he was placed on injured reserve with a knee injury, was never offered another deal, played for the Florida Tuskers in the UFL for a brief moment, signed with the Patriots, but was waived 2 days after they signed him in August of 2010. Then he started a coaching career that started with the New York Sharks of the Professional Women's Football League. Then went to Montclair University. Montclair Academy. I'm assuming that's a high school program. And then got a job as a graduate assistant at Rutgers. Then coached O-line at Bucknell, O-line at Sam Houston State, assistant O-line at Louisiana. Then for 2 seasons was the O-line coach in Gainesville for Florida, and then was hired by Washington when Quinn got here to be the assistant offensive line coach. Now, what do I know about his time here? I know that he had a high likability factor from players and other coaches, and worked very well with Blau and Kingsbury and other assistants. And they've liked him ever since they hired him, and they thought from the jump that he had a chance to eventually become something more than an assistant offensive line coach. Look, the bottom line is on these, Quinn's got to be right, but he's not alone, especially on the Blau thing. Blau would have been hired in this coaching cycle. I'm confident of it, to be an offensive coordinator somewhere. I mean, look at the number of openings we have. I mean, head coaching openings and then coordinators, both sides. And with some of these new coaches, they've got to hire both, O-line and offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator and O-line coach. I mean, you get into those circles and they'll tell you that the number of true, applicants that they're confident in probably isn't what we all think it to be. So when you see an up-and-comer that has talent that fits, you don't want to lose them. And one of the things that Quinn talked about when he got hired, he really felt like in Atlanta, he never had coaching staff depth. And when Kyle left to become the head coach after 2016, the Super Bowl team that Atlanta had, he took Mike McDaniel and he took others with him to San Francisco. And he went the Sarkisian route, Quinn did, but he never had that built-up depth and the rapport with the quarterback. He feels he has that. Look, I don't know what Tavita Pritchard would have ended up being had he stayed. I don't know if Blau would have jumped over him into the OC position. My sense is there's a chance he would have. But Tavita Pritchard, they really like too. He got a head coaching job at Stanford. So the question, again, I'll read the email from Lee. Lee wrote, Kevin, seriously conflicted on these hires. Now, Lee actually wasn't conflicted. He had a very strong one-way opinion. He writes, Dan Quinn hiring a green-as-grass OC, and then the same with the offensive line coach. He must be looking to get fired. Who would do this when he's coaching for his job? Can't believe Harris will keep him if they start the season bad or badly on offense. I can't tell you that I don't think that there's a chance that Quinn is on a seat that's warm and that's probably warmer because instead of going with a Mike McDaniel or waiting potentially for a Mike McDaniel, let me just say there's no guarantee that Mike McDaniel, A, wasn't going to get a head coaching job, and B, if he didn't, would have picked Washington over Detroit, Baltimore, the Chargers, or Philly. Yes, they have a very close relationship. Yes, Mike McDaniel said some incredibly complimentary things about, and they were very personal, about Dan Quinn's, assistance, help, friendship during a very difficult time in Mike McDaniel's life when they were in Atlanta together. But that doesn't mean that he was going to pass up on an opportunity somewhere else that he thought was better for him, might have gotten him back into a head coaching job faster. Look, the Chargers, if they have an offensive line, they would have potentially still been playing. So he may look at that roster, that team, excellent team on defense. Washington sucks on defense right now. A really strong supporting cast. Also, a very talented quarterback who's young. He may view the Chargers, he may have viewed Detroit or even Baltimore as a quicker way to being a head coach again than Washington. You can be lifelong friends and not work together again. So Quinn may have said, if I wait, there's no guarantee. And if I wait, I'm going to lose Blau. So I think they wanted Blau all along. I think that if Blau weren't in that building, if they hadn't hired Blau in 24, in January, February, whenever it was of 2024, I'm not so sure Cliff Kingsbury wouldn't still be in the building. Now, with all of the different, possibilities that are out there, the McDaniels, et cetera, I think they probably would have moved on from Kingsbury, but it just, it's been in their mind since they hired Blau, didn't play out exactly the way they thought, that Blau was going to eventually replace Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. They just believed in him that much, and they figured that Kingsbury, after a year or two, would get a head coaching job. So it didn't work out that way, but that doesn't matter. That didn't influence the way they felt about Blau. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Let's get to calls. Do you think, like Lee does, that this is major out on the limb stuff that will ultimately make or break Quinn? Let's start with Dre. Dre, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
Yes, so I'm glad you just brought it up that this has been in thought all along. I think since that Seattle game, and probably going in between that Seattle game and that Minnesota game is when the decision was made. I do think there was hypothetically some backdoor talks. Maybe Quinn got to look at his playbook or was going to Blau for consolation on what he feels the offense needs. And then part two to me is Blau, brilliant mind, came from a good coaching tree. And pending health, he could catch the NFL by surprise. And if we stay healthy with his good play design, tendencies not being caught up with, we might have a good year offensively. It's just a matter of will they adjust to him year two and will he evolve from there and get the rhythm as a play caller?
Yeah, I'm going to wait on worrying about year two. Year one, first of all, let's have our best players available to play because that's the number one reason the offense and the team in general didn't perform this year. And number two, let's hope that he, figures it out quickly because I guess with anybody in a new position with all eyes on him for the first time, there may be a little bit of a learning curve. I bet you if they thought there was a massive learning curve with him, that they wouldn't have done it. I think they're expecting, lights out performance from the beginning. I think they really have a super high level of confidence that this is going to work out. And, they would know more than we would. And work out, by the way they'd prefer it to work out, in terms of system-wise, et cetera. Let me just take issue with one thing. I don't think they thought anything about anybody after the Seattle game. In fact, I know that to be true. They laughed at those that, drew up, internet designs about how bad the offense was against Seattle. That is the game that they, more than any other, said were in complete disarray from a receiver standpoint. Had receivers running the wrong routes, wrong depths of routes. And that was one of the few games, the Green Bay game and really the Dallas game on the road, were the games, Minnesota too, where they were completely manhandled at the line of scrimmage. It turns out Seattle was a dominant defensive team. I think the Minnesota game really was the moment. I'm not suggesting that it wasn't in the back of Quinn's mind. I am suggesting that it was the moment that it became clear that it was a possibility he was going to move on. They seemed completely ill-prepared for Brian Flores' pass rush. And they also, we know that the play calling, especially on that opening drive, was very frustrating for Quinn. Thanks, Trey. Appreciate it. Let's go to Eric. Eric in Upper Marlboro. Eric, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Long time
What's up,
listener,
Eric?
man. Love your show.
Thanks.
I guess my thought around it is kind of like the opposite. I honestly think that with Quinn making this move to, say, someone who hasn't had the position before, I think that he may have had a conversation with somebody and said, hey, am I safe if I make this move to go there? Because you know how quickly this area is, the fans as well as the media are when it comes down to coaches that don't start the season off doing well. People are already talking about that now. If he doesn't start, if he's at mid-season, if he's 2-6, he gets fired automatically. That doesn't seem like that's Josh Harris's MO. But people are still creating that atmosphere that he has to do that. I think he had the conversation to be safe. Now,
I don't know that anybody would say, you're safe, or maybe they would say you're safe, but it doesn't mean they can't change their mind. And I'm talking about ownership. What I will tell you is that I don't think this was Quinn by himself having to convince the rest of the building that this is the right move. The rest of the building has felt the same way about David Blau from the moment they hired him.
Right. Now, Kevin, can I ask one other question real quick?
Sure.
I know we're talking about the offensive side, but on the defensive side,
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just offer the position, the defensive coordinator, to Ken Norton? I don't understand. Does he not want the position? I mean, he's played the game. He's won championships. That just would make sense to me. And even if they offered him that position, I'm sure there's not a fan here or anyone in the media that would have an issue with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, thanks for the call. He obviously worked with Quinn in Seattle. He's been a defensive coordinator multiple times in the league, including back in Seattle after being with the Raiders. And I don't know. We have not heard, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, or anybody else, that they have interviewed, internally Ken Norton for the defensive coordinator position. Now, that may not be something that we end up hearing. We didn't hear about Darnell Stapleton. He's in the building. He's currently their linebackers coach, and he's well-liked, and the players like him and the whole thing. I can't answer that. I don't know. I'll tell you this, though. I just wonder, when he reached out to interview Patrick Graham to start with, Jonathan Gannon, yes, they may have been just looking in the event that Jeff Ulbrich or Raheem Morris weren't available, and Ulbrich now isn't available. He's going to stick with Kevin Stefanski as the defensive coordinator in Atlanta. But maybe he wants to go somewhere outside of his comfort zone. I'll tell you what absolutely I think will happen with this hire is that he's going to hire somebody with defensive coordinator experience. Those are the people essentially they've interviewed, with the exception of Cullen and the guy from Seattle, Carl, the DB's coach that they interviewed last week. I think that Quinn wants to turn it over to somebody and say, it's yours, rather than Joe Witt Jr. being a first-time defensive coordinator. Let's go to Ian. Ian, go ahead.
Evan, come on, man. Game recognizes game. This game is the one who hired Joe Witt Jr. and kept him. So I don't trust Dan Quinn.
First of
at
all, I
all.
wasn't just specifically referring to him. The rest of the league likes David Blau, Ian. It's not just Dan Quinn.
So, David Blau.
What do you mean? Okay. Do you acknowledge that that's true?
I disagree. I don't.
You disagree.
David Blau.
Three teams reached out to interview him last year.
Okay.
3 teams after 1 year as an assistant quarterbacks coach.
So David Blau is so great that instead of making him even the number 2 person in the offense, the quarterback coach, he was behind Tavita Pritchard, and he only got elevated when he left.
Well, maybe that's because they wanted to keep lines above him where they could promote him so that he couldn't be, taken from somewhere else, and they could deny requests, deny interviews, so that there was a place to move him up. That happens. But just let's stick with your opening premise. Come on, man. Game knows game. Quinn's the guy that hired Joe Witt Jr. I wasn't specifically just talking about Dan Quinn, Ian. I'm talking about David Blau is one of those outliers where the entire league seems to believe he's the next big thing. They may not be right. No one's saying they're right. We haven't seen him call one play or coordinate for one game. But he was asked by 3 teams to interview last year after 1 year of being a coach. And then this year, there would have been a line to interview him. It started with Detroit, but Quinn took him off the market before others could reach out to interview him to be an OC. So that's what game knows game means. That's all. What's your next point?
I can go through this entire league of coaches that are completely unqualified and fired years later. So this notion that the NFL knows what they're doing is laughable.
Different subject. Different subject.
Kevin, just the simple process flow that this is a guy who, until 2 weeks ago, majority of Washington fans had never heard of, was 3 layers down on the head coach to OC to quarterback coach to assistant quarterback coach. The OC gets fired, and then this guy was somehow so great that they elevated him despite firing the OC, because the OC is, in my opinion, was somehow like scapegoated or
he wasn't scapegoated. Ian, you know that. You keep going to that line. He wasn't scapegoated. Clearly.
Okay, we disagree.
It would be so far down the list of why they finished 5-12.
Then why
way down the list. Why would he be the scapegoat when injuries would be number 1? Joe Witt Jr. in the defense would be 3, 4, 5, and 6 before you get to Kingsbury. He wasn't scapegoated. And as far as Blau, nobody knew about him. That's inaccurate. Our fans actually did know David Blau. He's probably one of the only true position coaches that we've heard about for a while. We've all been talking about him since they hired him.
Kevin, why was Cliff Kingsbury fired?
Cliff Kingsbury was fired because Dan Quinn and perhaps Adam Peters had a philosophical difference about the kind of offense they wanted to run.
And at no point in the season did the head coach tell the OC how he wants his offense run. That's a dereliction of duty right there.
Well, actually, in the Minnesota game, he took the ball out of Jaden's hands as a designed runner, as an option runner. He clearly talked about going into the Miami game as they got down to, practice squad player after practice squad player. We got to try to slow the game down. We got to try to slow the pace down. They were, 17th in pace of play this year versus 7th last year. They ran the ball a little bit more with their running backs, a lot more this year than they did last year. So there was probably some of that. But like I told you last time, given the players that were playing, they just had to get players who were practice squad players up to speed on the offense that they had learned over the summer. These are players that weren't expected to play at all. You understand? You seem to really minimize the carnage that they were going through each week, trying to get players on the field that knew what they were doing.
So again, we're having two separate conversations. One, I understand the injuries had an impact on the offense. Two, I don't understand if it was the injuries, why Kingsbury was fired. Because if you're saying, okay, it's injuries one, difference in philosophy two, but the head coach is there and only inputted here or there.
What do you mean? Why don't you understand that? Why don't you understand that?
They had everybody at the Minnesota game. They had everybody in the Green Bay game. They had everybody in the New York Giants game. The offense sucked because Jaden Daniels wasn't good enough. And then
that's what you really believe. First of all, the offense didn't suck. Secondly, that's really your takeaway from the offense this year, that Jaden Daniels, who played 4 games out of 17, start to finish, sucked? Really? Come on. You can do better than that. That sounds like an internet take. That sounds like a social media take. That's moronic. Moronic. He played 4 games, Ian, out of 17. He played 2 with Terry McLaurin. You can't really believe that.
What happened in the Minnesota game?
I think the Minnesota game was the game where it became clear for Dan Quinn that we got to try something else philosophically. They were not prepared for the pass protection. Look, the Minnesota defense was awesome for that stretch of games. It was his first game back after a while. He only played 3 series because the defense was on the field for 19 minutes. Or whatever that drive was, 19 plays, 13 minutes long. So you're talking about, again, small little sample sizes of Jaden Daniels sprinkled throughout a 17-game regular season. I want to make sure I never forget this one. Washington's offense sucked this year because Jaden Daniels sucked, and he only played in 4 games start to finish.
Yes, in those 4 games, yes. The other games,
you can do better than that. I got to get to a break. You can do much better than that. Dennis, Kenny, Rodney, Mark, Paulie, stay on hold. We'll get to you guys next. How much of a limb is Dan Quinn on by promoting from within David Blau from assistant quarterbacks coach to OC and Darnell Stapleton from assistant O-line coach to O-line coach? 301-230-0980. I'll have an update on the snowstorm next weekend, this coming weekend, next hour. Thor Nystrom will join us at 12. We'll talk some NFL draft with Thor. Let's get Paulie on. Paulie, go ahead.
Big guy, hell to the W, man.
Been a bit, man. I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, man, how you doing? I'm excited. We're going to get some snow this weekend.
I know. But, I mean,
To make
where
sure-
you are, you're down in
Norfolk.
Virginia, Tidewater, right?
Yeah, Norfolk, Virginia Beach.
Yeah,
Hampton,
so
Newport,
so you're gonna
Newport,
it's gonna be
about
cl-
seven.
it's gonna be close for you on this sleet and freezing rain.
Oh yeah, man. I got the tow truck ready.
All right, all right. What do you got?
I'm ready. Hey, listen, man. Hey, listen, man. I'm hearing a lot of crazy stuff. But I'm gonna say this, in my personal opinion, since Cliff has been fired or dismissed or whatever you want to call it, I'm feeling like, this season tanked out, right? If we'd have went 12-5 again this year, man, I'm feeling like Cliff was gonna leave anyways. That's just the feeling I'm getting. Win or lose, this was going to be his last year with us anyway.
Right.
Man.
Possible.
He has
Yeah.
he has head coaching pedigree, and that's what he was. He was a head coach. He wasn't an older head coach. He was a younger guy. He had one situation, and it wasn't it didn't work out in the end the way he wanted to, and it doesn't for most coaches. Most coaches get fired, but he did a solid job in Arizona. He had a chance to reboot himself. So he probably was already looking for a head coaching job anyways. People was after him last year. He turned people down.
He could have had the New Orleans job instead of Kellen Moore,
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Right. So I just think it was he was going to leave regardless this year. And now let's take it back to the beginning of last year, right? When everybody was patting Dan Quinn and everybody and the organization on the back about, man, look at the coaching staff they put together.
Yeah.
All the veteran coaches and all the young guys and the guys
Right.
from Philly. What did Dan Quinn? Dan Quinn said it himself. He said, well, we're trying to build an organization here where we're not just developing players, but we're developing coaches too. He said that.
Yeah.
We want to develop coaches too. And we all applauded him for that. Now, the whole monkey wrench in the game.
Let him
The
cook.
whole monkey wrench in the game, right. The whole monkey wrench in the game was Joe Witt. He didn't expect Joe Witt to fail as bad as he did. They wasn't expecting that. They was
Right.
expecting Kingsbury at some point to leave, not Joe Witt. So that was the problem right there. And Joe Witt is not a horrible coach. He's not a bad coach. He was
Right.
just a first-time, inexperienced coordinator with lack of talent. That's it.
Yes.
That's all it is to it.
Nobody
So,
out there
I
would
don't
tell
have a-
you it was all on him. I've said that for 4 months, that every single time I talk to somebody, they said, look, it's not all him. I mean, we got nothing right now, especially when they started losing their best players.
Listen, Cliff Kingsbury went through the same things Joe Witt went through on offense with injuries and such, just like Joe Witt, and a little lack of talent. But the difference was you had an experienced coordinator who knew how to work his way out of that versus a guy who didn't know how to work his way out of that because he's never been in that position before.
Yeah.
That was the difference.
Agreed.
So, of course, this defensive coordinating thing is going to be a big hire. That's
Huge.
the one that Quinn is going to be judged on, not the offensive coordinator spot. Like I said, they was grooming this guy for this spot because they knew at some point Kingsbury had a 2 to 3 year window, if that. They wasn't expecting Witt to fall on his face like that because that was his guy. Witt has been successful everywhere Quinn has been successful.
So listen, because this doesn't happen very often, I'm kidding, but I totally agree with you on the defensive coordinator, and not just the defensive coordinator, the defense overall. If it's terrible for a third straight year and it costs them a chance to go to the playoffs, that's a bigger risk to Quinn than David Blau not being up to it his first year, because everybody's in on Blau. This isn't Quinn out on a limb elevating David Blau. Everybody in that building believes in David Blau. People around the league would have fought over David Blau had he become available. Now, I'm not saying like Mike McDaniel or Stefanski or, Brian Dable if he ends up getting a head coach job, or the people that are proven, but people have identified him. They do this in a lot of businesses and a lot of sports. They identify the young guy that, look out, he's the next one. They're not always right. But he was going to be the next one. I think what happens on defense in 2026 for Quinn is so much more important than what happens on offense. And by the way, on offense, if Blau isn't right or isn't ready, they could still end up being really good because they've got a quarterback that's really good if he's healthy for 17. So I think what happens on defense is much bigger. And if we're comparing the two for Quinn,
Right.
I do, because it has sucked for 2 years.
Because they had a succession plan in mind on offense.
On
because
offense.
They knew because they knew Kingsbury wasn't going to be there for
That's
the
right.
long haul.
That's
They
right.
knew this.
Yep.
Hey,
100%.
I love you, man.
All right, I'll
Hail
talk
to
to
the
you.
W.
All right. We'll do this for another segment. So Dennis, Kenny, Rodney, Mark and Largo, stay on hold. We'll get to you guys next. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Real quickly, if you're thinking about new windows, Window Nation's got a great deal going on right now. It's buy 4 windows and get the next 4 free. So if you buy 8, you get, 4 free. You buy 16 new windows around the house, you get 8 free. And you don't have to pay for them for 2 full years. 2 full years of lower heating bills, lower air conditioning bills, comfy and cozy during these very difficult weeks upcoming, and it's going to be cold for a while, even after the storm this weekend. And you don't have to pay for them until the year 2028. No money down required, no monthly payments required, and no interest charged for 2 full years. You're working with the number 1 company, according to Forbes magazine, when it comes to window installation companies. They're phenomenal when it comes to handling you, the customer. They've got over 45,000 5-star reviews, and they've got a 96% satisfaction rating. 96% of their installs require no follow-up service, and they guarantee they'll install your windows in a day or less. They offer a lifetime warranty on them as well. If you've been thinking about new windows, I highly recommend Window Nation. And all I ask is just give them a chance to come out and give you a free estimate. Call them to schedule that today at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. All right. Lee emailed me yesterday. Kevin, seriously conflicted on these hires. Dan Quinn hiring a green as grass OC, and then the same with the offensive line coach. He must be looking to get fired. Who would do this when he's coaching for his job? Can't believe Harris will keep him if they start the season bad on offense. My guy Kevin in Arlington just texted me, and he said, Kevin, what you don't seem to be emphasizing is exactly what I would be. Quite simply, Quinn, the retread CEO. By the way, I'll just remind everybody, we have a matchup of retread CEOs and coaches in the AFC Championship game. That, by the way, the retread coach, why would you go in that direction? Some of the greatest coaches in history have been retread coaches, including Bill Belichick. I digress. Kevin writes, quite simply, Quinn, the retread CEO head coach, is down to his last strike in his at-bat as Skins head coach. When you fire both your DC and your OC after year 2, a forgettable year in every way, save for the injury plague, you better be right. For as heavy as the Rivera tax was, guys Adam and DQ hired to play defense for them were awful for a second consecutive season, only worse. That can't possibly be all on fired DC defensive coordinator Witt. And Peters and DQ are defensive guys, former college D linemen. Yet Quinn has to see a Shanahan he can defend. Look, I'm not saying the seat isn't warm. I think it's warm, and I think it doesn't reflect well on him that after 2 seasons, the OC and the defensive coordinator that he hired are both gone. Now, what Paulie said is true. I don't think they felt like they were going to have Cliff Kingsbury for much more than 2 years anyway, which is why they, focused on some young depth on their coaching staff offensively, because they really felt like Blau was a possible replacement when they hired him for Kingsbury, or Tavita Pritchard would be if he didn't get a head coaching job. So I hear you on that. But where I struggle is these things are dynamic situations. Fast forwarding to the end of next year is a game that just never works out when we're talking about NFL. It just doesn't work out. He's not a lame duck coach. He's not Rivera heading into 2026. He still is not even at this point a year removed. Or actually, he's now a year removed. No, he's not even a year removed from being in the NFC Championship game. That was January 26th, I think, last year, because it was the same day as their last Super Bowl win. So that's not even a year removed. And I'll tell you, in that building, they believe in Quinn as a culture and leader, CEO coach. They do. Now, you can't keep making mistakes on coordinators, and you can't keep having 5 and 12 seasons. But there's lots of context on that. And for me to declare that this is, an absolute, what did Kevin call it? that this is his last at bat, I can't say that definitively because I know what they think of him personally and what they think of a lot of the other stuff that maybe we don't feel. It's not as touchable, tangible for us because we just watch the games. But yeah, it's not a great look to have two coordinators. And to Paulie's point, I really think the defensive thing is a bigger deal. They can't be atrocious on defense for a third straight year when the head coach himself is a defensive head coach. Because if that ends up resulting in the reason that they, instead of going 11-6 or 12-5, they go 10-7 and just miss the playoffs, or 9-8 and just miss it, that could be a problem. He's got to get that DC right, and Adam Peters has to add some talent to this defense because they need it badly. All right, let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, go ahead.
What's up, Kev? Happy
Mark,
New
what's
Year,
up?
my brother. So happy to talk to you. Look, I just got something that I wanted to throw at you, and I want you to think very carefully about what I'm about to say.
All right.
Let's say if Washington goes 12-5 next year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say Jaden is just like he was 2 years ago, but the defense is still the same. They get to the NFC title game, and they lose, but they lose because they go into overtime, and the defense clearly is the problem. Now, here's what I propose.
Yeah.
Here's what I propose. Okay, if they go 12-5, they go to the NFC title game, they don't get there. There's a very
Hold on, I
good
just want to
chance
add. I want to
that
add
people-
because you're getting very detailed. They lose the NFC Championship game in overtime. Do you want to give me a score of that game?
44-38.
44-38. So I get where you're going with this. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The defense is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
But your offense, David Blau, after one season, people are going to want to hire him. You know that.
Yeah.
They're 12-5.
Yeah.
What do you see Adam Peters
I mean,
doing?
I hear you. Yeah, it'd be a difficult call. If he and Jaden have this special season, first of all, let me just say this, Mark. It would be really hard to do what they did in 2024 again, go 12-5 and win 2 road games and get to the NFC Championship game if the defense is the same.
They did it once. They could do it again.
Okay, but you know it would but I'm playing it out because it would take that elite top 5-ish offense with incredible, design, play calling, incredible quarterback play because Jaden was responsible for it more than anybody else.
Absolutely.
The answer would be, of course, we'd be sitting here saying you cannot let David Blau leave the building to become a head coach, at Carolina or, in Tampa. Yeah, I hear you. But can I also just add, I swear I hope we end up with that scenario. Please,
here's the thing.
please have us in the NFC Championship game in overtime with a chance to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you. But Kevin, here's what I'm trying to say, my brother. If you're in that situation, you would have to let Dan Quinn go. And I know that would sound crazy, but you would have to let him go because for 3 years in a row, like you just said, that defense hasn't gotten no better than let's say the defense goes from 27th to like 18th. Still not a top 15, top 10 defense.
Let me give you a better scenario for that. Let me give you a better ending. They lose 44-38. They were top 3 offense. They won 12 games. They won 2 playoff games. Who'd they lose to, by the way, in the NFC Championship game?
Oh, God, it would be painful. I can't say Philadelphia. I can't bring myself to say Philadelphia. I would say the Rams.
Okay, so they lose to the Rams. Okay, that's all. That's all. They lose to the Rams, and Dan Quinn retires. That would make it easier on everybody, wouldn't it? I don't know. Can we deal with that when we get to it? Do you have anything else? That was a good one. It was a good one. And look, if Blau is what everybody thinks he's going to be, because you'd be hard pressed to find somebody out there or in a lot of other places around the league that they are convinced this guy is going to be really, really good.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. This is not look. This is not Eric Bieniemy. This is not 3 years ago.
No.
Eric Bieniemy.
Bieniemy, by the way, looks like he's going to end up back in
Everybody needs to
Kansas
get that
City,
out.
which is good for him with
yes,
Andy
sir.
Reid's
Yes,
perfect
yes.
spot.
Well, what I wanted to say to you is this, Kevin. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let's say they go into 12-5. Are you going to go in saying, okay, they just made the playoff. Let's say they win the division. At 12-5, they win the division. They get they're number 2 seed. The defense still stinks.
It's going to be hard to go
going
12-5, win the division, and be the 2 seed if the defense still stinks.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Defense
I
still
mean,
stinks.
but I look,
I mean,
you know what
their
we're seeing,
defense looks
Mark,
like-
you know what we're seeing, and I got to let you go. I got to get some of these other calls. I mean, we have just seen here in recent years, certainly this year, just a resurgence of defense wins. I mean, we've got in the postseason, we have 4 outstanding defensive teams in the championship games. I mean, in the postseason, defense led New England more so than their offense did to 2 wins. Denver, look, they had a lot of offense. They also got a lot of turnovers in that game on Saturday. Seattle's defense has led them here, has led them to this spot. The Rams obviously are led more by their offense, but their defense is pretty outstanding, although, man, it ran out of gas. It was on the field for – I looked this up after I said it was approaching 80 plays at the end of regulation. 87 snaps when you factor in penalties. That defense was on the field. Now, it was an overtime game. Dennis and Frederick. Dennis, go ahead. Thanks for holding, Dennis.
Yeah, Kevin. Okay, so is Quinn on the hot seat? Yes, but not for what people are talking about or that guy talked about. I think he is because what happened during the regular season? He fired or demoted his defensive coach. He's a defensive head coach. He takes over the defense, and it was just as bad, maybe worse sometimes.
It was better
So
communication-wise,
that's what
though.
he's on the hot.
It was a little bit better in terms of they weren't giving up one explosive play after another with DBs looking at each other like, I thought you were going to be there and I thought you were going to be there. I mean, motion didn't fool them as much as it did. It was a little bit better, but you're right. It was still pretty atrocious.
Incrementally. Yeah. Now I want to bring up something that nobody that is Adam Peters on the warm seat. And I'm going to tell you why I think he should be. How does Seattle, how does Houston, how do these other teams build up their young, fast, strong defense with edge rushers? Through the draft, primarily. Now, what does he do? He gets an injured cornerback, and he gives multiple draft choices up for him. And then the guy, when he comes back, sucks. So we wasted those draft choices. And that made the Tunstall trade, who I loved. I think that was a good one. But that's more multiple draft choices. He's given up multiple draft choices for one player that he could have used to build up that defense.
The Lattimore deal, by
Shannon
far
is
away, the worst Adam Peters move since he's
without
become
a doubt.
general manager. But
it affected later because you gave up multiple stuff for Tunstall, and that it just builds up.
Well,
So
the Tunstall deal
he's on
is
the
a
hot
great
seat a
deal.
little bit too.
The Tunstall deal already,
Yeah.
you can pretty much say A+ home run deal.
Yes, but both of those combined are how many draft choices? 5?
Yes.
And it hurts.
Yes.
That hurts.
Four.
It
Four.
hurts a
Four
lot. They
total,
need to
right?
build through the
And then the
draft.
Debo is the
They
5th.
got to get rid of they got to get rid of the old guys. They got to get faster. They should have kept Chen. They should have kept a couple other people. Bobby Wagner was great 10 years ago, but I hate seeing him running after somebody who's 5 yards ahead of him because he's got a cover. I hate it. So let's look at Peters a little bit too. But Dan Quinn,
Peters has to add talent. I'll repeat again because I do think this is a bit overrated. I think the oldest team in the league thing just is a little. It's not unfair, but a lot of what made them the oldest team in the league was Josh Johnson. Excuse me, not Josh Allen. Josh Johnson, the long snapper, and Tress Way. Bobby Wagner was up there. Ertz was up there. Ballore was up there. But until Ertz got hurt at the end of the season, it wasn't the old players that were getting hurt. The old players like Von Miller and Bobby Wagner, and until the end of the year, which it sucked when Zach Ertz got hurt, they were playing every possible snap. And Von Miller and Bobby Wagner and Nick Ballore and Tress Way and the long snapper played every single snap that they were asked to play on. That doesn't change what you said, which is they've got to get younger and they've got to get faster. No doubt. Totally agree with that.
And just real quick, yes, those guys played and the defense still sucked. So
it was bad. It was really bad.
Younger.
I mean, the Minnesota game that gets referenced a lot. I mean, I still am a little bit dizzied by Ian's Washington's offense sucked because Jaden Daniels sucked. That's a rich take. But he pointed to the Minnesota game. It's still amazing that they made that team, a Minnesota team that could not score going into that game. I mean, they struggled with everything. J.J. McCarthy was on the ropes as a quarterback, and they made J.J. McCarthy into Joe Montana in one game. They had, I was looking at it during the break, they had that drive in the first half that went 19 plays, 98 yards, and took 12 minutes and 1 second of the clock. It was the longest drive of the NFL season. Jaden played all of three and a half possessions is what he played. They had a touchdown dropped on the opening one, and then they were in the red zone on the fourth drive when he got hurt after the Van Ginkel pick, which was his fault, no doubt. And he didn't play well. I'm not suggesting he played well, but he barely played, is my point. He barely played at all this year. And that defense was J.J. McCarthy's best game of the year was against us. Geno Smith's best game of the year was against us. I'm talking about, the average quarterbacks. Jared Goff literally played 7-on-7 for 3 hours against us. Sam Darnold had one of the greatest games he's ever had as a professional quarterback against us. It was truly embarrassing how bad this team was defensively. No doubt about that. Kenny and Charlotte, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kev? I guess if pessimism was currency, Ian would be a billionaire, man. I mean,
he's not. He doesn't err on the side of positive. That is true. That is
no
true.
doubt about it. I had my thunder.
He loved Jaden though. He loved Jaden, and he loved the team, Kingsbury, Jaden, everybody last year on offense. That's for sure.
He sure did.
Everybody did. That one was easy.
Yeah. I was sitting here and I was like, kind of had my thunder stolen a lot because these were some great calls today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably make a lot of fans mad out there by defending Dan Quinn in the sense that when you think about his past in Seattle, lauded for his defense, but he had the Legion of Boom, right? You look at even in Atlanta being a defensive coach, he had some pretty good players on the defensive side. Then on the offensive side, he had Matty Ice, he had Julio Jones.
Yeah.
I
felt like coordinating and calling the plays.
Yeah, I felt like he always had a Pro Bowler at tight end, so on and so forth. Right. What I'm trying to say here is if next year or after next year, the defense is still bad, so on and so forth, I feel like we got to look at Adam Peters, who is a first-time GM. I think we got to start looking at him more than anything because it seemed like when Dan Quinn had talent, he was much better than what we see here in Washington on the defensive side. He didn't run the offensive side. I think it's an overreaction about Blau. I think, we got to give it a chance. Nobody really knows, but because of what everybody is saying in the league and how they feel about Blau, we can't criticize.
I'm a bit excited to see it, to be honest with you, because there's such, kind of informed hype about him that I am very intrigued to see this and a bit excited to see what it looks like because he obviously has a quarterback, and but they have to add some things offensively too. They need another receiver. They really need another receiver or two. And now they're going to need a tight end.
It's about talent. At the end of the day, it's about talent, Kevin, because Dan Quinn got Atlanta to a Super Bowl. He played, I think, in multiple Super Bowls with Seattle, or at least one?
Two, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Two of them, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean,
two of them
you
is the DC, right?
You got to give the coach the groceries, man, and let him. You know what I mean? Like Adam Peters, to me, about it, because I was really high on Adam Peters, and now I'm more hot seatish with Adam than I am with Dan Quinn, to be honest with you. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks as always. Appreciate the call, Kenny. I think the thing about Dan Quinn as a defensive guy, you know, the Legion of Boom, the talent, and even just system-wise, that's 2013, 2014. You know, everything evolves and things change. And Single High, Legion of Boom, Cam Chancellor, the talent they had, the whole group, which, by the way, I just pulled up what the rankings were defensively. They were the number one defense in 2013 and 2014, number one in yards, number one in points. Year one in 2013, number one in takeaways. By the way, that's the trifecta defensively. Number one in yards allowed, number one in points allowed, number one in takeaways. By the way, twice in Dallas, right? He was number one in the league in takeaways. He's been 31st in the league in takeaways in 2 years as a head coach in Washington. And at the end of each season, last season, and even this season, when they had, you know, him and Peters up there in the season-ending presser, Quinn said multiple times down the stretch and then in that press conference, what went wrong? And he focused in on, we didn't take the ball enough. And I remember having him on before the season when he was on the show before the season began. And I said, you know, where are you looking? What will tell you that defensively it's going to be different than it was in 24? And he said two things. He said tackling consistently, but takeaways. We've got to take the ball away. And it's something that he had experience with in Dallas and in Seattle, Atlanta to a lesser degree, but he also had Micah Parsons in Dallas. He had two high-risk aggressive corners in Diggs and Bland. By the way, nobody knew anything about Bland when he set the NFL record for pick sixes in a year with Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator. But I think part of it, too, is just things change, things evolve. Has he evolved? Has he, you know, adjusted to what offenses do? Maybe that's why he wants to be more of a CEO coach, because he's not, and maybe he'll look outside of his tree here to find somebody. I don't know if that's going to happen. Because it might end up being, you know, Raheem Morris. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know if he's the same guy as a designer and caller as he was in Atlanta as a head coach, calling defensive plays and coordinating defenses in Dallas, or certainly in Seattle. But yeah, I think there are reasons beyond what we even understand why it may not be definitive that if they have a rough year, he's gone. I think the seat's warmer, but I think there's a lot of respect and a lot of love for him in that building about who he is and how he's impacted the culture. I mean, you have to, you know, you can roll your eyes on stuff like this, and that's fine. But for people that do this for a living, you know, and then, you know, to hear that the locker room never felt like it was lost at any point during a really difficult season. People in that business look at the head coach and they say, he's the reason why. And that's a very important thing to weather a season storm like this one and to not lose the team. Rodney in Dallas, finish it up for us. Rodney, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Well, first of all, I'm out here in Dallas. I was in military and law enforcement for all these years, and it's so good to be able to tap into a internet or a process where I can get my fan base recognized. And so, thank you for that.
Sure.
So, as a leader of men or anything like that, you got to understand that you think about they know the fan base is starving for success. Number one. And Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have to understand that they're not making decisions loosely. The original call was he's doing it to fire himself. I think that's asinine. You got to be able to do things in the best interest. Josh Harris is really wanting this to happen, and I think they would not mortgage their future in making ignorant decisions. And I've led men that were retirees, and they didn't have to be there. They didn't have to depend on their job, and it was hard to lead them. But in this situation, the locker room cannot be lost. And I think Dan Quinn's the right guy, and they're making sound decisions. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah,
I'd like
sure,
to hear your
Rodney.
comments.
Appreciate the call. I mean, again, I think we just live in the era of you've got to have a declarative, opinion today about something that's going to happen a year from now. And in situations like that, especially with this league, which is week to week and is almost impossible to predict, that's just hard to do. I do think that if I were the owner, that losing 2 coordinators in 2 years is, a bit of a reddish, pinkish flag. But I also don't know everything that's going on in that building because other than what I hear. And I think Ron Rivera, I think Dan Quinn is a highly respected, leader, a culture builder, etc. Bottom line is, though, I mean, I've said this since the season finale against Philadelphia. They obviously can't have another season where they lose all of their best players for the majority of the games. That you can't win that way. But B, they have to get better on defense. To me, this offseason is defense, defense, defense. I'm excited about the Blau thing to see how it plays out, to see if all these people that know much more than we know are right about him. And it would be phenomenal, wouldn't it, if they got the next big-time coordinator, the next Ben Johnson, the next Sean McVay, et cetera. It'd be awesome, especially given what he has to work with at quarterback. But we saw a resurgence of defensive football leading the way in 2025. And you can't be anywhere near as bad as you were on defense and expect to win, and expect to contend. Offense, you can still win a lot of games with offense in the NFL, but you can't win 3 road games to get to the Super Bowl with what they had on defense last year. And that should be the goal. So we have to be sitting here a year from now talking about a defense that improved significantly because the coordinator was the right hire and they added, 3 to 4 pieces that made a big difference. All right, everybody's talking about this storm. I'll give you my somewhat knowledgeable weather view on what's going to happen this weekend. One model just came out and absolutely crushed the DMV with snow. I'll tell you how much it crushed us with when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. All right, we had Doug Kammerer on the show yesterday for a half an hour. He was great. I love Doug, and he does such a great job. I didn't want to ask him to come on today, but I'll probably ask him to come on tomorrow or Friday. There are other weather people we can get. I could probably get, we've had Topper on the show before. Used to have Sue Palka on the show all the time, but Sue's retired. I don't even know who does weather for Channel 5. I don't know who does weather for Channel 5 or Channel 7. I can't tell you that for $1 million right now. Doug's Channel 4, Topper Shuts Channel 9. They've both been there forever. Anyway, at this point, you guys have heard about a potential massive storm for not just us, but basically Texas through maybe even New England. By the way, if the storm tracks in a certain way, it would have been absolute Armageddon had the Patriots played Buffalo, had the Bills won in the AFC title game in Foxborough on Sunday. Because there's one model that, not only nails everybody here, but also New York and Boston. And that thing would have been like 1 to 2 inch per hour snowfall rates during the game in Foxborough. But we don't have to worry about that. And the weather looks lovely in Denver for the AFC Championship game. Temperatures in the 30s, something like that, but sunny. And it looks lovely in Seattle again. The weather for the Seattle 49ers game was nice on Saturday night. Looks like no rain and temperatures in the 40s. So as we're sitting back on Sunday, and this is kind of the fun part, right, of a storm, when they come on the weekends and there's football for you football fans, all of you who are listening to this show, or certainly most of you. So we'll have 2 championship games on Sunday with a big storm on Sunday. So this, for those that don't follow this, I'll try to explain it as best as I can because I'm hardly an expert, but I play one on TV. It changes. The forecast when you're 4 or 5 days out, it just changes every 6 hours, sometimes every 12 hours. Yesterday with Doug on, we were talking about almost all snow. Like there was no concern about whether or not there would be sleet or freezing rain for us. It was an issue of, will we get as much snow or will the snow stay more to the south? I mean, I know he posed the scenario of it could come up a little bit closer, bring warm air in, and we could get sleet and freezing rain, but that's really not very likely. If this happens, it's going to happen and it's going to be all snow. But 6 hours, 12 hours later, after he was on with us, several models hinted at a warmer solution, meaning lots of snow, but then lots of ice on top of the snow. Let me tell you what we don't want. We don't want freezing rain. Freezing rain is power outages, and that's where we all get into major issues. A lot of snow is a problem around here, too. I'm not denying that. But at least a dry, powdery, cold snow isn't power outages. Freezing rain, we've had some of those disasters, with freezing rainstorms where, if you don't have a generator, you're SOL. I don't have one. I don't have a generator. I don't know why I don't. We talked about getting one. We just never did. But now some of the models are shifting back away from sleet and freezing rain. So the point is, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what any weather app tells you, no matter what anything you learn on social media, it can change, and it probably will change with the next set of model runs, which happen basically every 6 hours. Some models do every 12 hours. But the big models, the Euro and the American model, the GFS, are in agreement that there's going to be a massive storm. Nobody's debating this. This isn't one of those where if it develops in the right place off of the coast, then we're going to get buried. If it develops off the coast, we're going to get nothing. This is a big storm coming from the west, through the southwest, through the south, tapping the Gulf for moisture, and then moving northeast up. And the issue is, how far will it get up? We don't know. But right now, the American model run that just happened in the last half hour is basically all snow or 95% of it is snow, and it's 1.5 feet. It's 18 plus inches region wide. Starting, late Saturday night or very early in the early hours post midnight on Sunday and continuing for basically 24 hours. It's a long duration storm. The Euro that ran this morning also backed off a lot of the sleet and freezing rain and showed something similar to the American model. Now, the Canadian model that a lot of people like, literally, and I'm looking at it right now, just came in with a totally different solution. And it is snow and several inches of it, and then a lot of sleet and then a lot of freezing rain. What do I think? I mean, again, we all have access. If you don't know this, all of these models are out there on the internet. They've been out there for years. And it's really not hard to learn how to read them. If it were difficult, I wouldn't be able to read them. Like, anybody can figure out how to do it. It's just, and it's all out there, for you to look at. But there's so many of them, and they end up being different. Now, the one thing that nobody disagrees with at this point is that there isn't a massive storm that is going to take place from Texas through, at least our area in Philadelphia. Whether or not New York and Boston end up getting it, who knows? They probably will, but who knows? And then is it going to be all snow? Is it going to be a mixture of snow, sleet, and freezing rain? And if it is all snow, is it going to be the jackpot area where we get, yes, a potential 2-foot snowstorm is in play with this? Or is it going to be that it stays more to the south and we end up only getting, 6 to 10 inches or 4 to 6 inches? Still too early to tell. I like our chances, though, for a wild weekend, late Saturday, Sunday of weather. Like, it's going to be something. And then what also looks like kind of more of a guarantee, because the weather models tend to predict the temperature stuff much more accurately than the precipitation, is that we're going to be cold for a while, like a week minimum and maybe a few weeks. Remember last winter, we had 7 inches of snow on January 7th or 8th, and it basically didn't leave the ground for a month, maybe even longer than a month, because we were so cold. And that's what we seem to be having, right now, that the models are agreeing. We are really locked into some brutal winter for the next 3 weeks, maybe longer than that. But we haven't had the possibility for this kind of storm since 2016. That was the last one. We got 2 feet plus pretty much area wide. Some places had 30 plus inches. That was, by the way, championship weekend, and New England played at Denver. It was Brady against Manning in that particular AFC championship game. The NFC championship game was Carolina and Arizona. And Carolina whooped Arizona, and that was the Carolina-Denver Super Bowl that Peyton and Denver won with Von Miller as a star in that game. But we're going to have, this is going to be, it's already a massive news story, and it's going to be the rest of the week. And places in the South that end up just getting freezing rain, that's where, Doug talked about this yesterday, that's the worst when you end up having that, because it's power outages, and those people down there, they're not prepared for it. They don't have the ability to, remove it and get rid of it. I personally just hope we end up with a big snowstorm. I like this. And then when it's over, I typically like it when it melts quickly and we're back to normal. But that's not going to happen with this one. Anything's possible, really, from very little snow but bitterly cold to a lot of snow and bitterly cold to a lot of snow and a lot of freezing rain and sleet. It's all in play right now. Yeah. So there you go. Max, are you into this stuff or not?
Yeah, I mean, whenever there's a big snowstorm, I'm always like my interest is piqued. I will also see a lot of these charts pop up on my Twitter timeline, and I'll I have no idea what the numbers on them mean, but I do know what the colors mean. And so I'm seeing a lot of pink and white, and that means we're probably screwed. I would prefer somewhere between 6 and 10 and have it go away quickly and look pretty and all that, as opposed to getting a foot and having a bunch of stuff screwed up because I still have to get to work. But it's certainly gonna be an interesting week next week. We're gonna have a lot of fun, that's for sure.
I do love like some of these weather apps. Like right now, the Apple weather app for me, DC, Northwest DC,
Mhm.
2 to 3 inches on Saturday, 21 to 26 inches on
Ooh.
Sunday, and 1 to 2 inches on Monday. So that would be 22 to 28, and then 24 to 31. Yeah, I don't, that's, you can't buy into that. I mean, if you ever look at your weather app, sometimes it'll say it's snowing and it's raining.
Mhm.
You know, I will just tell you, because I'm looking at the UK model, which is coming out right now, that there is more of a consensus building that we're going to get a lot of precip and a lot of it's going to be snow, but that it's going to eventually, you know, especially DC areas south and east, going to mix with sleet and freezing rain. And just so you know, that's freezing rain, not at like 32 degrees. That's freezing rain at like 24 degrees. So that's the kind of freezing rain that immediately takes down power lines. We don't want that. That's something, I don't think anybody wants that. Yeah. All right. We're going to talk some draft with Thor Nystrom at 12. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. Thor Nystrom, who is a draft expert, we have him on every year, typically a little bit before the draft, but why not start now? He'll join us in about 5 minutes. I did want to address the Buffalo situation, which we really did not do on Monday or on yesterday's show, because the owner, Terry Pagula, spoke yesterday on the decision to fire Sean McDermott. By the way, there's a story that Josh Allen's going to need surgery in this offseason. He's going to undergo right foot surgery. But it's a procedure that apparently will not keep Allen out of even off-season activities. So that's good. Terry Pagula, in defending his decision to fire Sean McDermott but keep general manager Brandon Beane, pretty much threw receiver Keon Coleman under a bus. Listen to this. So, as you know, part of this season-ending press conference, first of all, one of the things he said was, I went into that locker room after the game and I saw how distraught everybody was, and that was a determining factor in firing Sean McDermott. What did you expect to see in a locker room after a devastating overtime playoff loss, which ended with great controversy in overtime? But anyway, Terry Pagula said that Sean McDermott and the coaching staff pushed the general manager and the front office to draft wide receiver Keon Coleman in the 2024 draft. Keon Coleman was a high, thought to be a first-round guy in 2024 out of Florida State, ended up being the very first selection of the second round by Buffalo in the 2024 draft. But here's what the owner said. The owner said, I'll address the Keon Coleman situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but Coleman wasn't his next choice. Well, then you're saying that he wouldn't have drafted Coleman. It's certainly not in that spot. That was Brandon, this is Pagula talking, being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff who felt strongly about the player. And, you know, he's taken for some reason, and I'm not saying a word about it, he's taken for some reason heat over that pick, and he's not said a word about it. But I'm here to tell you the true story. I just think it's funny. It's like the guy just finished his second season in the NFL, and he has not been overly impressive. He's a big dude, man. Keon Coleman is. You know, he's 6'4" and he's 225 pounds, and he looks the part. But he just hasn't done it in his 2 seasons. 38 catches this year, 404 yards in 13 games for 4 touchdowns. His rookie year, you know, pretty much similar to that, although his yards per catch was much higher. There you go. Terry Pagula taking an opportunity to defend why Brandon Beane is there by throwing his first second-round pick in that draft under the bus like it was Sean McDermott's fault that we drafted Keon Coleman, not Brandon Beane's fault. He would have taken somebody much better. I'm looking at that draft. They took him number 2 overall. And remember, Buffalo desperately needed a receiver because they were losing, you know, they were going to lose Diggs, or they thought eventually they were going to lose Diggs. The next receivers taken were Ladd McConkey with the next pick. He went to the Chargers. Polk from Washington, who was, you know, there with Odunze and Penix Jr., went to the Patriots at 37. And then Adonai Mitchell, who went with the Colts, has had some moments. Malachi Corley with the Jets. Yeah. I'm trying to look at the rest of the receivers to see if they really missed. Whatever. All right, there you go. Do we have Thor? All right, we'll reach out to Thor right now, get him on the phone. Do we have him? Yeah, good. It's good to have Thor Nystrom back on the show. Thor has been on the show many times over the years because one of my favorite things about the lead up to the NFL draft is Thor's top 500 board, where he goes through his top 500 prospects and then gives pro comps for every single one of them. He's been doing that for a while. You can follow Thor on X on Twitter at Thorku, Thorku. He's also part of Score North. Phil Mackey, who we've had on the show many times, is a big part of Score North. And I actually had Phil on the show before the Skins and Vikings played, and Thor's a Minnesota guy. So before we get to the draft, I did want to ask you, this is from afar, help me out on this. Brian Flores has interviewed for head coaching jobs. He's also interviewed for defensive coordinator openings, including here, Thor. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, do you think he's back in Minnesota or somewhere else?
I think he's going to be somewhere else. I think it's weird that his contract wasn't extended, so it allowed it to lapse, and then that he is taking other defensive coordinator interviews when sort of the way that the Vikings have been depicting it is he's only out there looking around for head coaching jobs, and if he doesn't get one of those, we expect him to be back. Well, then why are you taking the other defensive coordinator interviews? So I do expect him to leave, Brian Flores.
So why?
You know, this stuff that doesn't have anything to do with football. There's some stuff inside the building, and it seemed like there's some people in the front office kind of out on Brian Flores, at least before, from my understanding of it. As a former employee to put some stuff out on social media, you know, I don't dabble in that kind of stuff, but you wonder if the stuff in the building has been smoothed over with Brian Flores. But I think that speaks to why do you not have a contract right now? You're one of the best defensive coordinators, if not the best in the NFL. Why was that contract not extended? Why are you in this position? Or even if Brian Flores gets a head coaching job right now, we're not sure that the Vikings would get the 2 comp picks that you generally do in that situation because his contract has lapsed. So there wasn't really anything in it for the Vikings not to get that thing done beforehand. You just wonder about some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to that because, you know, I saw what Phil Mackey had said about if he doesn't come back, it has nothing to do with him being the great defensive coordinator that he is. It's other stuff. There's smoke around a lot of different things. And obviously that gives us hope because let's face it, regardless of whether or not he's a short shelf life guy, and that may be the case. He was that in Miami, and maybe he's that in Minnesota too. I'll take that short shelf life of 3 years if it means he's our coordinator, because our defense was terrible. And I think, and you can speak to this better than I can, I think he consistently got more out of less in Minnesota.
1,000%. I mean, the team down the stretch wasn't allowing passing touchdowns, even though their cornerbacks aren't great, right? That guy, it's a next level genius in figuring out how to generate pressure and how to confuse quarterbacks to beat after the snap. That's what his genius is. The thing of packing guys up against the line and then who's going to rush, who's going to drop back. You never have any idea. They're going to change the picture on you right after the snap. Just so difficult for quarterbacks to go up against. But yeah, next level tactician in Brian Flores. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Where do you think? So let me ask you, we'll finish it up on this. Where do you think he ends up? Head coach somewhere or DC somewhere? And if it's a DC, where?
I think it's going to be DC. I think that the pending litigation is the thing that is going to prevent him from being the head coach for now. I don't want to say the Packers, who have a defensive coordinator opening right now, because then it would be that would be a dark day here in Minnesota. I'll toss out the Commanders. I think it's a weird fit, but in some ways it makes a lot of sense for a team that needs to figure out how to generate more pressure. Not a better person that you could add to get that done than Brian Flores.
Thor does this top 500 on the draft every year. It's not too early to talk about the draft, but I do want to just kind of go back a little bit because I've had you on the show many times, and I love the way you do comps, and I love the fact that you've got a 500-player board, which is pretty unusual, and it's always done well and laid out very well. But we're talking about the 2024 quarterback class for the last 2 years because it certainly has produced here early. You had Caleb 1, Jaden 2, JJ McCarthy 3, Drake May 4, and I think you had Penix 5. I'm assuming you had Penix 5. I don't see Penix, so he's probably further down the list. But tell me, from that, what your first 2-year takeaway is on how you saw it then and how you see it now.
I feel good about the top two guys. I should have had Drake May at 3. I think, obviously, in hindsight, McCarthy, the struggles this year, they were what they were. I'm still pretty bullish on that. I think you look at the stat profile, and if you just look at that, it's, that's where you get the argument of, how bad he was in his first year. I think what people miss is, and people know that he got injured, the durability thing obviously comes up. McCarthy suffered 4 different injuries this past season, and he played out the games in every single one. Against the Falcons, he had a hip drop tackle, third quarter, Caden Ellis. That's where he suffered the ankle injury that had him out for a month and a half. Right. Baltimore, he hits his hand on Donovan Jackson, et cetera, et cetera. Well, anyway, you look at those 4 games, the stats he put up after that: 10 for 28, 124 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 2 lost fumbles. 5 of his turnovers came when he shouldn't have been out on the field. Right, the Falcons one, he misses a month and a half after that, but he has to play that game out. The Packers, he had a concussion, throws an interception right after that. Whole point being, when he was healthy on the field, his completion percentage was over 60, had a high touchdown rate. The turnover is still elevated, but I think there's more there to build around and more to be excited about maybe than has been depicted. I would expect a lot better season for McCarthy next year.
So do you think, Kevin, I read that quote in the middle of the season when he said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing now, that JJ's mechanics have to be reworked. His footwork has to be reworked. And that's pretty damning, that early in a career to say that. So do you think Kevin O'Connell still believes in him?
Yeah, and also kind of odd, right? We hadn't heard anything about mechanics during the preseason. They only played him for one series of one preseason game. We didn't hear about that. We didn't hear about it until after he got injured with the Falcons game, and then all of a sudden there's this sort of hyper fixation on the mechanics. You wonder if how much of that was directed at Josh McCown, who had been his position coach for a year and a half at that point. But yeah, like the thing people talk about, it's like the leg whip on some throws down the field, way that he generates velocity. Not the only guy that does that. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that does that, but there's some things with that he has to clean up. He takes a big exaggerated step forward on some throws, comes over, like barrels over the top, like a major league pitcher. You see the fastballs out there.
Yeah.
There's times there where you're lunging a little bit too far forward. That's going to cause some errancy on your passes as well. There's definitely stuff to clean up there. And as you know, with Kevin O'Connell, it's that intricate passing system where he wants you to go through the progressions as laid out, right? And you're supposed to time that drop back, your footwork, to the play in question, right? And so there's just a lot of different stuff like that. At the end of the season, when O'Connell was like, we're not going to talk about mechanics anymore, we just want him to finish out the season, just go out there and ball. All of a sudden, McCarthy, the on-field play got a lot better. And I know that coincided with playing some lesser defenses as well. But I think this offseason, you get him for the full time. Obviously, he missed the first year with the injury. I think there's going to be a lot of work with that, and you'll see improvement.
Look, if he could just line up and play our team's defense every week, he's Joe Montana, because that was probably his best game of the year. We're talking to Thor Nystrom. Thor is a draft expert, but also a Minnesota guy. By the way, I think one of the narratives about the quarterback situation in Minnesota this year is a bit off, and I'm wondering if you agree. The idea that they should have just kept Sam Darnold or kept Daniel Jones. Those guys were free agents with choices. Why would they have stayed in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy, where they'd have to battle it out with him when they were given starting opportunities? Certainly, Darnold handed the starting job in a Seattle situation, and Daniel Jones up against Anthony Richardson in Indy. I don't know that even if they had given them a bunch of money to stay, that it would have been in the best interest of Darnold to stay in Minnesota. What do you think?
I totally agree with that. Kwesi had been setting this up for a couple of years of clearing the books, then getting the top 10 quarterback, and then sort of building the rest of the roster back up through free agency with all the money that you had opened up. And last offseason, that was sort of the culmination of where he had gotten to. He opened up all that money not to spend it on quarterback. It's the reason that Kirk Cousins was allowed to leave. It was the rest of the roster. My understanding is that the one contract offer that they made to Sam, it was like a 1 year, I guess you call it kind of lowbally. I think it was mid-20s or so. You can understand why Sam would leave for that, but they didn't have more that they felt with the way that they had planned this out for a couple of years to give to the quarterback position. What they really thought was going to happen, they thought they had the Daniel Jones thing done. And I believe that they offered $1 million more for 1 year than the Colts ultimately offered. But the thing that swung that for Jones was he thought he had a better shot to start with Indianapolis. Yeah, right. That's a factor the Vikings couldn't change for him, right? Like he'd been in the building, so he had more exposure to it than anyone. So yeah, to your point, sort of hard to look at an alternate there. I guess they should have had a backup option to the Daniel Jones thing. So when he changed his mind, you have something else to go to. That's the thing you can criticize. But more or less, I agree with your point.
What will they do this year? Last one on that team. I'm just curious. I mean, aren't they going to bring in a veteran?
They might bring in a veteran near and dear to your heart, Kevin.
I don't think. Do you think Kirk's going back?
I could see it. And I know now with Atlanta bringing in Stefanski, so that's going to be a thing there. They obviously have a prior relationship, and you have this offseason, you have an NFL draft where you only have one immediate start quarterback in there. You have very few free agent quarterbacks that the organization would be comfortable starting right away. So Kirk is going to have interest on the open market, and I don't think the Vikings are going to go way above that sort of the money that they had earmarked for Daniel Jones last year. How much higher can they get above $13, $14 million? Could they get to 20 on a 1 year thing? So that's going to be sort of the thing, but I do think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting with him to see if he actually wants to play next year. I'm not convinced that he's going to play next year, but he certainly would have opportunities to start next year after the way he played in Atlanta. After
how good is he on TV, Kevin?
He's so good on TV.
So good.
So good. I mean, he'll be hired immediately, don't you think?
100%. And at least what we've seen with him on TV so far, he'll be one of the better ones right away. He's so good up there. You know, like the thing in the middle of the season when he started talking about pure progression systems against the reading the coverage instead. Just fascinating stuff. He's so well spoken.
All right. Before we get to this year's draft, I know it's only 1 year. It's impossible to judge a draft after a year. But what do you feel best about from your top 500 in 2025, and what don't you feel great about after 1 year?
Like as far as like where I
where you had guys? Yeah.
I would have to go back and check my board
it's
really quick, but yeah, I mean, like one of the guys that I ranked way higher than he ended up going was Shadir Sanders, but I was happy that he got out on the field and got to show us some stuff. It turns out that me and the Packers were maybe a little bit too high on Matthew Golden. Would be maybe another one that I would.
He had a good playoff game against Chicago. It was like the first time we saw him active, like not active, but making catches and he scored on that one play to give him a lead late.
Oh, he sure did. But yeah, and also Will Campbell played better on the left side, I think, this year than I would have thought. So I'll toss that out too, although I wasn't like crazy low on him. But those would just be a couple quick thoughts. But yeah, the board was pretty close last year. To the way that I had it, barring the Shadir thing. So I would say, mostly in line.
All right, let's talk about April. We're a couple of months away, and it'll be warmer then, which will be nice. Where do where do you think you'll have Mendoza?
First, for sure. This draft
compare him to other, like the 24 guys.
I think, man, in the 2024 class. I mean, I would have had him probably 3 or 4 amongst those quarterbacks in that one. I think the comps that I like the most for him, Jared Goff coming out of Cal, and then Matt Ryan coming out of Boston College. I think that those are fair. In structure, as the pocket passer, Fernando Mendoza is a killer. If you can't get to him and you can't push him off the spot, he's going to get that pill out there and put it on hands. He's so good with the back shoulder stuff, the accuracy, the placement, it's all really good. You have to push him off the spot. That's where you see the accuracy start to depreciate and some of the wonky decisions there. But yeah, as far as an in-structure guy, and that's what reminds you so much of a Goff or of a Matt Ryan. You just keep that pocket around him. He's going to put the ball on hands.
He's bigger than both of them, I'm guessing, by at least a little bit on Goff. But don't you think that his athleticism is a little bit underrated and probably superior to Ryan and Goff?
That would be to Ryan for sure, and I do think that he is an underrated athlete. He's kind of like a tall giraffe at 6'5", 225, who goes north-south quicker than you would think. I think you think about athleticism. The thing that he's not going to do, he's not good at changing directions, but he steals 10 yards from the defense quicker than they think, right? It's like you blink and all of a sudden he's 10 yards down the field. That's the thing he can do, the running straight line and just sort of shooting out of the pocket. So I definitely agree with that. And it's definitely something you have to say for his evaluation, because he did that in college, stole 20, 25 rushing yards every single game. I'm guessing he's going to be doing that in the NFL as well.
All right. Washington has 7 overall. They were horrendous on defense. They need 5 to 6 contributors, significant contributors on defense, and they need a new coordinator as well. So I'm going to give you at 7 a choice of the following: Reuben Bain, David Bailey, or, just because I want to find out where you have this guy, Jeremiah Love. Actually, let me throw one other player into the mix, Caleb Downs. Those 4 players, you're Washington on the board at 7. What would you do?
I would take Reuben Bain if I was Washington, because Washington, not only have they needed the edge rusher now for years, and not only has it culminated in taking the seasons down the last couple of years, that position, but also you need a 2A1, right? You want the guy that can run defend in addition to getting after the quarterback. Yeah. That's Reuben Bain, and you have a shot at getting access to him potentially because of the shorter arms thing, right? In my opinion, that guy should be a top 3 pick, but there is that possibility that he falls out of the top 5 just because of the short arms. But I've seen him destroy offensive tackles, NFL offensive tackles, over and over and over again throughout his career. Most recently, we saw it on Monday night. He was against Carter Smith, the Indiana tackle. Carter Smith's going to go in the top 75, and he had no chance, none, against Reuben Bain. So as far as addressing the Commanders' need at the right value, for me, it would be Reuben Bain.
He's not twitchy like Bailey, though, in terms of a pure, menacing threat as a pass rusher at the next level. I mean, I totally agree with you, because they need an edge-setting run stopper, too. They need everything. But yes, as a pass rusher, do you think Bailey will end up being a bigger, have to game plan for a guy than Bain, or not?
I do think so. Yeah. Just as the pure pass rusher, I love Bailey's game with that. And I do think he's a fit for Washington. It's just, you're going to get a little bit better of a pass rusher, but you're going to have to take the trade-off of the worst run defense. Bailey makes flash plays against the run. It's the same thing of getting into the backfield really, really quickly, and he'll blow plays up quick. But on the plays where he doesn't, that's where you can just blast him out of the hole and move him around. Because obviously the thing that he lacks, it's the play strength there out on the edge. So it's just the fit thing with Washington, and knowing that they also want to improve the run defense at that position is why, for them, I might lean towards Bain. But we did a mock exercise earlier today on a different show I was on. I gave Bailey to the Commanders because I had Bain going number 4 to the Titans. I think both those guys are in play. And I know that Washington fans really want Caleb Downs. That's what I've been hearing, is the fan base of Washington talking a lot about Caleb Downs. I wouldn't necessarily, argue too hard about that. At number 7 in a draft class that is devoid of blue chip talent, we know that Caleb Downs is a blue chipper at that position. It's just with the needs of Washington, you wonder if, whether it's Bain or a Bailey available there against, let's say, a Downs or against a Love. I think they might then prefer to go the edge rusher with that position.
Can you imagine Bain lining up next to Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee? Because I think Simmons still, I don't think fans understand how great he is. And he was phenomenal this year.
And he would finally get some help. And with another marauder there, just pure power on those guys, that would be difficult to contend with.
Is Caleb Downs what some people have said? Is he Ed Reed? I mean, come on. What is he? Who's his comp?
Caleb Downs, yeah, you hear Ed Reed. Certainly that's probably actually the way that I would lead. It's the one I got on my sheet right now. There's other ones that you could certainly make the arguments for. I like the Ed Reed one though, just because of the instincts. They're always around the ball. And I think they're going to end up having fairly similar measurables. But yeah, there are a lot of similarities there.
Is Jeremiah Love, a guy that is going to end up being a Bijan or a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Barkley, where you're taking him super high and it pays off?
Yeah, yes and no. Like some of those guys I prefer to Love. I see Love kind of like Reggie Bush coming out of USC, where it's that straight line propulsion from a guy who also is really good in the passing game. He had a mix and match guy with him at Notre Dame in Jadarian Price, and they give Jadarian Price some of the carries and offset some of the workload. I like Jeremiah Love's game a lot. And again, in this class, it doesn't have a lot of blue chippers. I do think he's probably going in the top 10. But, for instance, I would have preferred Saquon Barkley coming out. I think I even would have preferred Genty, like having like a number on it. Just slightly. They're very different kind of players. Obviously, Genty was in a terrible situation this year, but yeah, I do think that Love deserves to go in the top 10. But if I'm Washington, for me, it would either be the edge rusher or Downs. That's what my list would be, even though I understand why the Commanders might look at the running back position there, and maybe the fans might advocate for it too.
Give me a guy or two right now that or you have a hunch is going to be underdrafted, and then a guy or two that'll end up being overdrafted.
In terms of overdrafted, I think one of the guys, Spencer Fano from Utah, I think is the offensive tackle. I think is going to go a little bit higher than I would be comfortable with, especially in this offensive line class. He's undersized. He's just a little bit over 300 pounds. He is a good athlete, but I've seen him struggle, certainly against power. But I've also seen him struggle against movement a little bit more than I would like for a guy whose entire profile is sort of built on that. I think, same position going the other way, a guy that I think is going to get underdrafted and is going to overproduce on his draft slot is Monroe Freeling, the tackle from Georgia, who was sort of a surprise declare at the very end. But Monroe Freeling is an absolutely insane athlete, 99.8 percentile on-field athlete using the chips, just the GPS chips or whatever, last season. The data on him as far as an athlete is just crazy. And it's an ascending talent who might be a little bit, a year early. The NFL is expecting him next year, not this year. But I think he goes at the end of the first round. And I think he has as much ability as anyone in this tackle class, and arguably has the highest upside of any of them.
Do you like Branch from Georgia, the receiver? Because I've seen him mocked in the first round. I've also seen him mocked outside of the first round. He looks like Luther Burden, but better to me.
Yeah, he's a really tough one, because you wonder, is he a guy like that? Is he a guy like a Zay Flowers, like someone like that? Or is he McCall Hardman, all over again, where it's the undersized guy with the 4.3 speed that can't win downfield without the ball in his hands. Zachariah Branch, the concerning element of his profile is how many of his touches, and he had a lot of touches in college, but how many of the receptions came within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage? And we've seen some of these manufactured touch guys that go to the NFL, and they have a little bit more excitement behind them, and then they end up failing. Your Rondale Moores, your Laviska Shenaults, different guys like that. Can he sort of overcome that? And look, God doesn't give that kind of athletic profile to many guys. I mean, he is just lightning in the bottle as an athlete. Certainly going to improve a return game, if nothing else, and will certainly give utility on those manufactured touches. But can you get more out of him? And I think that's sort of going to be the investigation into film by some of these teams. And when you get them in the room, of why weren't you used more down the field? You were with Lincoln Riley, then you're at Georgia with a really good coaching staff. Why did both of them decide that your best usage was within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage? Be really curious with that. But Kevin, to your point, it is a guy that really intrigues me, because there's just not many guys that go into the NFL that move that way.
I mean, we saw one Monday night who will, we're still a couple of years away from Malachi Toney being. Oh, yeah. I mean, he looks like Tyreek Hill, doesn't he? The way he plays.
Oh, Sure does. And he's a bulldog too. I love when Malachi, he blocks as well. He's throwing passes, he's running. Malachi Tony does it all. I can't wait for him to be in the league.
Yeah. This was great as always. Oh, last one. Sorry. So you said this, you implied this, that it's not a great draft. So you just kind of rate this draft based on, a draft that's normal. Is it better than, worse than, how much so? And if there's an area of strength, where is it?
I would if all the drafts were on kind of like a bell curve, and you have an A, you have an F, and everything in between. I'd probably have this one as like a D plus. I do think it's a down class, and predominantly because we don't have those blue chip guys, and this is something of a function of NIL with how many guys went back. We had one of the sparsest lists of underclassmen declarees this year that you'll ever see. The thing where I think maybe it's a little bit better, I think the depth is okay. I think that especially at a couple positions in particular, like the wide receiver depth of this class, I like some of the defensive positions, linebacker in particular. I like the depth of it. We're getting to the end of the guys that got the extra year of eligibility from the COVID season. So you're starting to see all those guys' eligibility vanish. The guys who had a choice, most of them went back.
You mean Carson Beck can't go back and play another year?
He can't get an 8th year, at least as far as we know. And we'll see on some of these.
Do you
other
think he's an
guys,
NFL quarterback real quickly? Because I do.
Yeah, I think he's going to get drafted probably 4th, 5th round, something like that. He's probably going to be like the 7th or 8th quarterback on my list. He can make the quick decisions and throw accurately right after the snap. Obviously throwing downfield, that's where you start to see some of the interceptions crop up. But yeah, he's shown enough in college that he's going to be probably an early day 3 pick.
Great job. I'm definitely going to reach out to you as we get closer to the draft and after your top 500 comes out. Thanks for doing this. Hope you're well. Thor Nystrom, everybody. Thanks, Thor.
Always a pleasure talking to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Yep. At Thorku, THORKU. The first of what will be many, many draft conversations between now and the end of April. Interesting. I mean, Ruben Bain was unblockable the other night. Totally unblockable against a future NFL tackle. I think David Bailey is the one that really interests me because I want that player as an edge rusher that has a chance to blow up and be a player like Will Anderson, like Danielle Hunter, like what we watched over the weekend. But Bain is special, and to his point, he'll be an edge setter, no doubt, as a run stopper. He's an overachiever in many ways. But God, was he powerful and good the other night. When we come back, we'll look ahead to Sunday's 2 championship games. We'll rank the teams 1 through 4. We'll rank the quarterbacks 1 through 4. And we'll rank the coaches 1 through 4. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Championship weekend this weekend, doubleheader with the weather that'll be happening outside. Yeah, I mean, I'm giving Denver a chance. And I'm giving Denver a chance because of their defense, because they're at home. And Jarrett Stidham, I mean, he hasn't done much as a player in the league, but the Patriots drafted him and loved him. Josh McDaniels signed him and brought him to the Raiders when he was a head coach. That's a pretty good endorsement. And then the first player that Denver signed as a free agent when Sean Payton became the head coach was Jarrett Stidham. I think, look, if he was that good, wouldn't he have played a lot more last year for Russell Wilson once Sean Payton became so sick of Russell Wilson? I mean, I was it last year? No, 2 years ago, I'm thinking. 2 years ago. Because last year, Russell Wilson was in Pittsburgh, of course. Anyway, so what Max and I are going to do is we're going to rank the 4 teams, 1 through 4, the 4 coaches, 1 through 4. That's really hard to do. And then the 4 quarterbacks, 1 through 4. Let's start with the teams, and we'll go 4 to 1. My 4 is Denver. I think that's easy because of the quarterback situation.
Of course. So we cement that at 4.
So the third best team of the 4 for me is New England. I mean, I think in many ways they're fortunate to be here. I'm not taking it away from them. Their defense has been outstanding. Mays made some big-time throws. How about some big-time catches from Douglas and Butte and Diggs, of course. But they had a team on Sunday that all that team had to do was run the ball 3 times and punt the whole game, and they probably would have had a chance to win the game. They buried the Chargers, though, with their defense. I've got the Patriots as the third best team of the 4.
Damn, we might actually have the same top 4 here because I also have the New England Patriots just because, and we're going to get to these last 2, but when you talk about battle-tested teams and stuff like that, the Pats, great game last week, a dominant performance over a really good defense, but I just think that both of these teams coming out of the NFC are going to be the favorite going into the Super Bowl, and it's just going to be it's coming out of the NFC this year. That's my call.
By the way, I saw that with Bo Nix, Denver would have been a 1.5-point favorite. So essentially what they were over the Bills when the game finally kicked. But they are 4.5-point dogs with Jarrett Stidham. So Nix is essentially worth 6 points to the line for Denver. Number 2 on the ranking of the 4 teams list for me is Seattle. I'm going Rams over Seattle. I believed in the Rams all year. I'm a little leery of them right now. But I think if this game were playing on a neutral field, the Rams would obviously be favored in that game. I think the Rams are a better team. I'm taking Matt Stafford over Sam Darnold every day of the week. And I'm taking their receivers, even over Smith and the Jigba. But the combination of what they have at receiver, Nakua right now might be the best player playing on Sunday, the best all-around player playing on Sunday. The Rams, I've got at 1, Seattle at 2.
Yeah, I mean, I've got them in the same spot. I mean, I go back to the battle-tested thing. That game that they played on Thursday night was unbelievable, and I think that Seattle getting that win gave the Rams a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. That kind of hurt them down the stretch of this season, but now's the time to get your lick back and go to the Super Bowl. So I think the Rams are going to be locked in. So yeah, give me the Rams 1, Seahawks 2.
All right, let's rank the quarterbacks 1 through 4. This is actually pretty easy.
It is.
You know, obviously Stidham of the 4 is number
naturally
4. I've got Darnold. I think it's pretty easy at number 3.
Yeah, because I feel like he might, turn into a pumpkin at any second. So I'm less worried about that with May and Stafford, who sit above him.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 front runners for the MVP have to be 1, 2, and I'm going Stafford 1, May 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Stafford's put the ball up for grabs a couple of times. I mean, we've seen that here over the last month of the season. But, I mean, Drake May has fumbled 6 times in 2 games. 6 times. He's got to protect the ball Sunday. He's made some big-time throws, no doubt about it. But, you turn the ball. That's how Denver wins with Jarrett Stidham on Sunday. is if Drake May, puts the ball on the ground 3 times and loses 2 of them. And with Benito and their pass rush, it's possible, because the one thing I've noticed is New England's played exceptional defensive teams these last 2 weeks. Is as good as he is throwing the football, and I think he's phenomenal. And I also think he's a great runner. But, man, there have been times when he's dropped back where he is a little bit oblivious. He was 4th in the league this year in sacks taken. I think as a rookie, he was near the top in sack percentage. He's been sacked 10 times in 2 games. He's been strip sacked 6 times, basically. Well, one of them was a run on Sunday when he had it knocked out as a runner. But he's got to feel it a little bit faster and get rid of it. He's got to get to his check down a little bit sooner against these good defensive teams. I still think when they gave him time or he was off schedule, he was great. Great. And the 3 touchdown throws, you couldn't have put him in a better spot. But the way they lose the game Sunday is that Drake May puts the ball on the ground another 2 or 3 times, and they lose 1 or 2 of them in a big spot. And look out, Nick Benito is one of the best players remaining in this draw with 4 teams and 2 games left. Benito strip sacked Josh Allen on Sunday, and I could see that happening. I mean, New England can run the ball more effectively against Denver than they did Houston. I do believe that. So they've got to stick with that. Mays 2, Stafford is 1 for me. Is that the way you have it?
Yeah, that is also the way I have it. Also, the way I would vote the MVP, but that's just me.
Me too. All right, the coaches.
This is impossible.
This isn't easy.
Impossible.
Yeah, ranking them 1 through 4. I mean, at least 1 through 3. I mean, I got Mike McDonald 4th just because he just doesn't have the resume that the other 3 have.
Exactly.
I believe in this dude, though, and I believe in his staff, and I believe in his team. But I've got McDonald 4th. I'm assuming you do too.
Yeah, I do. It goes back to the resume thing. I've watched all these guys. I watched Sean Payton win a Super Bowl over 12 years ago. I've seen Mike Vrabel have continued success in the playoffs with a bad Titans squad, and then Sean McVay is Sean McVay. So that's kind of how I have it out.
So wait, did you just give me your top 4?
No, I didn't. Not at all.
Okay. Because this is where it gets dicey, and I'm gonna surprise you. I think. So let me go 3, 2, 1. We'll both do 3 here. I've got Sean Payton at 3rd.
I'm not going to disagree with you there because I also have him 3rd. It's just, man, like I said about Vrabel, dude, that he's such a good coach, and the turnaround that he's been able to have in New England for this past season has just been so formative.
You're talking about Vrabel's, but you've got Peyton 3rd.
Yeah, I know. I've got Mike Vrabel above Peyton. That's why I'm talking about Mike Vrabel.
Okay, because this is where my surprise comes.
What do you got?
I've got Sean McVay at 2.
Wow.
And Vrabel at 1. Vrabel of the 3 is the best game managing head coach of the 3. Not debatable. Sean Payton's okay. It's pretty good. Sean McVay, like a lot of the Shanahan tree guys, not always buttoned up. I mean, he really butchered the end of regulation against the Bears on Sunday night. I mean, if they lose that game, you're looking at McVay like you took 2 timeouts with you at the end of regulation when you could have had a minute plus on the clock. Imagine this. Imagine Ben Johnson did go for 2 and they got it and they were up 18-17 and he's got 18 seconds left when he should have had about a minute 10. I mean, that was a dereliction of game and clock management duty from the head coach. I love Sean, and I love everything about that team. And he is, I mean, these are 3 of the best in the game. But I'm going Vrabel 1 because Vrabel never messes that stuff up. He may be the best in the league at that. And I'll go McVay 2, Peyton 3, McDonald 4. So I'm assuming you have Sean McVay 1.
I do have Sean 1 just because I respect everything he did here. And I mean, he's just such a good play caller that I have him at 1, but I completely understand your point on Mike Vrabel, because Mike Vrabel is like one of the only coaches I've seen out time manage Bill Belichick, which in my eyes puts you,
and Harbaugh too in the postseason.
Yeah, so you're up there with time management gods. So I could definitely see the case for Vrabel being 1, but I got McVay 1, Vrabel 2, Sean Payton 3, Mike McDonald sitting at 4.
All right, we're done for the day.
Yes.
Tomorrow we're going to rank the top 5 players on championship weekend. That's not easy either. There's some really good players in this Final Four. All right, back tomorrow. Chris is next.